Hello everyone. So, the 2026 North America Fanfest for Final Fantasy XIV is happening, and here we are. So let's talk Evolve jobs. Specifically, I'm going to start with White Mage. I want to say in advance, I'm pretty terrible at this. You guys know this whole video making thing. I'm also slow. Not many videos lately. I work 40 plus hours a week on a salary, not a high one at all, like half the median income, but I do like it. And that's not counting when I manage to get myself to the gym after work, department meetings, training, emergency calls in my little rural fire department. You get the idea. So I don't exactly have a lot of time. I'd say I try to make up for quantity with quality, but you all know I suck at that too, so this is just for fun and no one will watch it anyway. I'm also doing stills here to really dig into and break things out. A lot of people have done videos, but it can be kind of hard to follow things. Though note that of these jobs, I play White Mage and Paladin. Those are the ones I kind of understand, while Dragoon and Bard I don't really play, so my insight into them won't be as useful. So I'm going to start with White Mage, and then where I go from there will depend on, I guess, whether or not it takes off. So here we go. First thing first, Evolve jobs. A couple things on this overall to set the groundwork. Evolve jobs seem to be a toggle you can use at any time when out of combat to swap between the two modes of play for all the jobs existing in the game right now. New jobs will only have the Evolve version going forward, and Blue Mage and Beastmaster will only have the classic versions, which they are calling Reborn, as in this has been the paradigm of job design since A Realm Reborn. So think of them sort of like specs you can swap between for the 21 current jobs, but new jobs will just have the new design. Secondly, they're going to try to balance the encounter design and tuning so that Reborn and Evolve modes for jobs have similar output. When pressed, JCP said the Evolve ones may be a bit stronger, but the goal is to not be far apart. We all know Party Finder can blacklist over the most minor of things, but let's just go with what's been stated. Third, Evolve jobs are going to have fewer hotkey binds. Their goal seems to be 16 or less to fit on the crossbar tab without having to cycle between tabs. But to accomplish this, instead of just removing buttons, they try to get more buttons to pull more weight by doubling up on the things that they do. For example, a button may have different effects if on a hostile versus a friendly target. Paladin has one that's Clemency if used on an ally, it's Heal, or itself, but is the Holy Damage spell Holy Spirit if used on an enemy. Or they've combined multiple effects. For example, White Mage's Aquaveil, its 10% damage reduction, and Divine Benison, its Bubble Shield, have been merged into a single button with a 30-second cooldown. Or change depending on some context. Paladin has one button now that is Shield Lob, its ranged attack when you're at range, and Shield Bash, its stun if you're in melee. Like a macro I literally made for myself doing deep dungeons for the last, 2-3 years now. They stole my idea, but it's a good idea, so if I do say so myself, so I'm not even mad. They're also compressing 1-2-3 combos into single buttons, and making cooldowns shorter so that you're engaging with these buttons more often. For example, White Mage's party buff, the Wings, Temperance, is down to a 1-minute cooldown from a 2-minute cooldown, but lasts 10 seconds versus the current 20 seconds. The overall feel is a lot closer to the PvP kits, which a lot of players have said that they like. Also, keep in mind, despite people on forums suggesting otherwise, Yoshi P said absolutely nothing about getting rid of the Reborn mode. It doesn't seem to be some transition that they're eventually going to kick everybody to the Evolve mode, or at least he hasn't said anything about that, so we probably shouldn't lead with that assumption. Right now, the goal seems to be to make everyone happy, both people that like current design and people that want change. Next up for Evolved and Reborn, they seem to be trying to remove the 2-minute meta, or what they're calling party synergy buffs. So the 2-minute meta may be gone. That doesn't mean that there won't be any party buffs. It just means that things aren't going to be all lining up on a 2-minute timer anymore for any party buffs that they do decide to leave in, and that job rotations may not necessarily be designed around 2-minute burst cycles anymore. Finally, we also have to consider that this is all in development stuff, complete with placeholder job gauge developer tools and probably some placeholder icons. For example, the Paladin display had Gunbreaker's continuation icon. This is all work in progress, subject to change stuff, so keep that in mind as we go through the systems, icons, and slides. I know that's a lot. I might throw up some bullet points here so you guys can pause and read them before we move on. And if I did, and if you're back with me, let's get into it. White Mage seemed to me to be the quicker, more direct one of the displays that they showed, the 4 jobs, but that may just be because I'm more familiar with it. So let's start with the layout. From left to right, top to bottom, we have Asuna, Medica 3, Plenary Indulgence, Raise, Tetragrammaton, Aquaveil, Cure 2, the icon. We'll get back to this, but the ability is actually High Cure. Benediction, Temperance, Surecast, Ethereal Shift, Liturgy of the Bell or Lily Bell, Swiftcast, Glare 4's icon, but the ability is called Holy Sanctify, or Sanctuary, Glare 3, and Holy 3, which they never actually used. Note that some of these abilities are actually different than their current Final Fantasy XIV versions, like the Glare 4 icon, and these may also be placeholders. Draw your attention to the right of the Minotaur enemy. Blown up in larger side to the right of that, the Lily gauge is rendered here as a 0.0 of 20-second recharge, so same 20-second recharge per Lily as now, and a max of 3 stacks, same as now. Right under it, you can see Sanctity, with what appears to be a maximum of 3 pinkish circles. It's hard to see here, but you'll see them as they fill. The latter is basically an evolution of the Blood Lily bloom, but more granular. Also note the slightly different MP costs. In the current game, Glare 3 costs 400 MP, but here only 200. Glare 1 costs 400 and Cure 1 costs 400 and Cure 2 costs 1000, yet here seems to only cost 400. Medica 1 costs 900 MP, Medica 2 and 3 costs 1000, but here Medica's icon cost is listed as 800. Esuna, which presently costs 400 MP, has no listed MP cost. Raise is still 2400 MP though. So that'll set the stage for what we're about to see next. Cure 1/2 seem to have been replaced with High Cure. It's sort of what Black Mage's naming system's done with things like High Fire, High Ice 2 for its AoE rotation. Note that it costs as much as Cure 1 at 400 MP, and it has a cast time. It's possible they may just make Cure 1 upgrade to Cure 2 upgrade to High Cure. But we didn't get that from this presentation. Global cooldown heals have cast times, just as today, but are supposed to fill the Sanctity gauge, which seems to work a lot like the current Blood Lily gauge, to allow damage to be refunded from doing GCD healing. Instead of the current paradigm of never cast a global cooldown heal, it's a DPS loss the system of today has. The new Afflatus Misery that uses this, but seems to use the same basic mechanic, is the 2-charge Glare 4 icon on the right, which is the Holy Sanctuary ability. Unlike Misery, it seems like you can use it with 1, 2, or 3 charges instead of the current Afflatus Misery, which requires Blood Lily to have 3 charges to be in full bloom. The damage is scaled based on the number of charges. The ability also has a 30-second cooldown when used, so there's probably some room for optimization, but you don't have to worry necessarily about overcapping since it's somewhat more flexible, though we'll have to get our hands on it to see if it's more or less in practice. It also appears Holy Sanctuary may heal at least the White Mage, but they didn't mention this, so I'm not entirely clear on what's going on there. I just noticed the healing number. But where are the Lilies, you might ask? Notice that they're still up here and still take 20 seconds to charge. How they seem to factor into things is when the Plenary Indulgence button here is used. It consumes 1 Lily and turns High Cure into Afflatus Solace and Medica into Afflatus Rapture, the AoE version. They seem to then do hot ticks, at least Solace did, so it's probably more correct to think of this as Cure plus Regen that costs no MP but costs a Lily and is instant cast, or Medic 2 that costs no MP but costs a Lily and is instant cast. In this way, Plenary Indulgence seems to be a lot like Sage's Eucrasia, just consuming a Lily to get those extra effects. Note also in this picture that Tetragrammaton does about 2/3 the healing of High Cure. This could just be a numbers tuning thing that they change later, but it may also be that they want off-global cooldown heals to be more quick emergency buttons rather than carrying your healing. Note also that Glare now has a 1-2 combo with itself, each costing 200 MP, but working sort of like Pictomancer's 1-2-3 combo being on the same button. Using Glare will make the next cast into High Glare. It's unclear if there's a damage difference here, but it does mix up the animations in VFX. They did say that it'll have different effects, but I can't tell by the numbers or anything else that they do, so it may be just a higher crit chance. Who knows? We'll have to see what the tooltips look like in the end. Note that both Glare versions at 200 MP cost half as much as healing spells, and since you won't use Holy Sanctuary after every single global cooldown heal, global cooldown healing will still be a greater MP burn over time, though it's unclear if that's accounted for by some other mechanic. Also note that they are instant cast, the Glares that is, allowing for movement. Here we can see that Divine Benison and Aquaveil are both being on the same button, which has 2 charges and a 30-second cooldown. For current White Mage players who know these abilities, basically Divine Benison is how it exists today: bubble, shield, off global cooldown with 2 charges and a 30-second recast. It just now also gives the Aquaveil damage reduction effect, both of which last 10 seconds, as opposed to Aquaveil being a separate button with a 60-second cooldown. Note some people saw this here with the Swiftcast and thought Divine Caress must have a cast time because it consumes Swiftcast, but it doesn't. He casts Holy Sanctuary basically right on top of it. That's what uses Swiftcast. Divine Caress, I think, was used somewhere else in the video also without Swiftcast and was also instant. I also want people to note here that Temperance's full cooldown appears to be 60 seconds. So Evolved White Mage will now get Temperance twice as often and Divine Caress with it. Note further, and they explicitly stated this, Temperance increases the White Mage's movement speed. They didn't say the party, so this is probably just the White Mage themselves, so you can run faster with it. No mention of the radius being changed or anything like that, though. So in short, those are the White Mage changes, at least listed here. Button cut down, your GCD heals will now contribute to a damage spell, basically like if your GCD heals fed the Blood Lily under the current system, just with more granular use of said, Blood Lily. And otherwise, it seems to be relatively similar to White Mage today. Some people have commented on differences, but there really aren't a lot other than now your Glare is instant cast, now your GCD heals won't be a damage loss. You don't have a dot to maintain, I guess, but that's about it. Anyway, we'll stop here with that, but that's the White Mage Evolved version job showcase. Now, keep in mind, this is all subject to development, but also they're keeping Reborn. So if you like current White Mage and don't like this, you can just keep playing current White Mage when it comes around in 8.0 with, an extra off-global cooldown button every 2 minutes or, whatever they decide to give it. You'll just have this as a second option, so yay. Alright guys, that's it for this one. Later.